Please welcome director William Goldenberg. Actor Jharrel Jerome. And producers and subjects Anthony Robles and Dr. Judy Robles. I want to start with the doctor in the house. Judy, when I'm not a big sports movie fan, but what I love about this film is that it's ultimately a love story between a mother and a son. And you're such an inspiration because you, despite the challenges of your son, you taught him not to be defined by his challenges and to persevere and succeed. Where did that come from?
Oh, wow, that's a big question. Well, I was 16 when I had Anthony, so I was still a kid myself, and I was trying to raise this beautiful little baby boy, and I didn't feel capable at all, but I knew that he needed me to believe in him and love him, and we basically raised each other, I think. So it was back and forth. I got strength from him, and he gave it back to me, and I think it was really important that I was always honest and genuine with myself and my limitations and what I could do, but I was never going to be the one to stand in his way. When Anthony wanted to ride a bike, I was like, I don't know how he's going to do that, but I wasn't going to be the one to tell him no. He figures everything out on his own, and Anthony's always been that way, and I saw that passion and that drive in him. So I think I just continued to be like, great, and encourage him, but people were always there, commenting and staring and things, and that crushed me. So I always wanted Anthony to know how much I loved him. There's moments in that film where Jennifer is touching, Jharrel's face, and I talked to her and said that I wanted him always to be able to look in my eyes and see someone that loved him, and I only wanted him to hear my voice at all times, regardless of what was going on. So I think that, hopefully that had a part in the young man that you see here today, my baby boy.
And yes, thank you. And Anthony, you wrote a book about your experiences, and now it's a motion picture. You were very involved in the writing process. You're a producer. You act in the film. You choreograph the wrestling sequences. Tell us about, from your vantage point, seeing this journey, your story, the book, and now a film.
Well, first, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's an honor. And, to write the book was exciting for me. When we had the opportunity to produce the film, when Billy approached us, it was exciting, but at the same time, we were scared. My whole family, we were terrified about that thought, because it's like the world is about to see our story. And it's not just the triumphant moments, it's not just the good moments, it's the losses, it's the painful moments as well. And so what I was nervous about was how was that story going to be portrayed? What was going to be focused on and who was going to tell it? And these amazing group here, they really focus on making us proud. They focus on having our input on the things that we wanted to be focused on. And that, to me, was very special, because from start to finish, we were able to take our notes and give our input on the things that concerned us that we didn't like. And Billy took that to heart. And he said, we want to make you guys proud. And they did that. And so for us to sit here, to have this legacy, our family legacy, something that we're proud of, that's something that's really hard to describe in words. But I'm just so blessed to have Billy and Jharrel, be really focused on making us happy. So.
And Billy, going back to what I mentioned about this not being necessarily a sports film, this is a love story between a mother and a son. Can you tell us about focusing on that strand of the story?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to separate this from other sports movies, but that's not why we went in that direction. I mean, I met Anthony and I met Judy, and it became so clear to me that this is not a typical story, which is usually would be, a coach and a father figure to a young man. But I just when I read the book and met the two of them, I thought, no, this is a story, like you say, a love story between a mother and son, and I think their relationship is so unique and so beautiful, and it sort of just went so naturally into making the film and separating it from other films. And I mean, it wasn't like, oh, I need to force this story to be this. It was just like so clear to me that was the heart of the story. And I think that, our screenwriter John Hyman was also able to like infuse all the wrestling with story, so that it all sort of fuses together. And even though we're in wrestling sequences, Judy is so present in the stand, and the connection between them is so strong that I think it continues to be a mother and son story, even in the wrestling sequences.
I greatly admire that the role that Bobby Cannavale plays. It could have easily be this mustachio villain. Instead, is a very three-dimensional, delineated role. Can you tell us about approaching that?
Well, I'm glad you feel that way, because Bobby, from the very first time Bobby and I spoke, that's always talked about, is that this needs to be, this is a fully formed human being with, positive attributes and a lot of negative attributes. And we didn't want him to be a sort of mustache twirling, like you said. I mean, we use those words, because we want to see the reason they're together and the reasons they don't end up together, obviously. And it just, anytime, I guess you want to call him a villain in a film, and when they're a really fully fleshed out character, it's a much more interesting movie than, everybody over here is good and everybody over here is bad. I mean, it's like, it's got to be some combination, because all of us are some combination of that. So, I just think Bobby and I were very concerned, especially Bobby was very concerned that it wouldn't come off as one-dimensional, and he did such a beautiful job, bringing out those moments where, you could see a certain amount of regret, or that he was having a good time with his family, at certain times, so that there was some joy in the house. But ultimately, so much of the credit goes to Bobby and how he was, was able to perform that role with just the different layers. And I think, you can see them in various parts of the film, so it's credit to him.
Mm-hmm. And Jharrel, I mentioned to you briefly when I met you, I've been a big fan of you, but you've always been in supporting roles. Now you're a leading man.
Oh, yeah.
And you rocked it. I remember seeing an interview with you about the movie where you said you had never been in the gym before.
Okay. Twice or 3 times. Not never, but no, I was not comfortable with the gym before this film. Yes.
And then
I didn't know that, by the way.
Well, you weren't supposed to know that. Nobody was supposed to know that.
And then how was it for you to, you went through incredible amount of physical training for this performance.
Yeah, look at this guy,
I was having a martini at the hotel when he showed up, and the martini glass and his shape, I was like, it's the same.
Yeah. That's actually, did you hear me say that in an interview before?
No, I was having a martini, right? Yeah. And I was like, and he showed up, and I told you, I said, you're like shaped like my martini glass.
So what's really cool about that is Billy's wife, Allison, is a movement coach, and he brought her on board to help me get comfortable on the crutches. And so I could not look like I sprained my ankle 2 weeks ago, and I'm wobbling on them. And so when I was in those classes, it was about maybe 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, for a couple months, and that was the shape that we came up with. This is awkward. I don't know if you knew that, but it was like, all right, Jharrel, martini glass. And then I'd go like this, and I'd be like in like straight posture. This guy's posture is unbelievable. I'm sitting here like this. And so, yeah, it's funny you say that. But that was kind of one part of a whole, I call it like a boot camp sort of training.
But your training was so complex in the sense that you had to learn wrestling, you had to build up, you also had to learn how to move with the crutches and the mobility, correct? And then, but wait, you also, I heard the voice, the sound of your voice completely changes that you're actually, working to sound like Anthony. Can you tell us about all the
Yeah.
training?
It's like PTSD in my head right now. It was exactly how you just broke it down. I for 5 days a week, about 6 to 7 months throughout last year, I was doing like a 9 to 5, I call it. From 9 to 11, I was in the gym with a trainer who was making me lift like ungodly amounts of weight. But it wasn't about getting as big. I would need like 3 more weeks in steroids to get where this guy's at. Like 3 more years, excuse me, and steroids to get where this guy's at. So it was less. It was more about just the the shape and the confidence in the gym and being upright in the posture and just getting my shoulders to kind of widen out. And then after that, I would go from the gym into a car and go to downtown LA to a wrestling room where Anthony was there with his actual coach, Brian Stith from ASU, and I would learn wrestling, a specific type of wrestling as well. It's one thing to learn wrestling, the basic form of it, but nobody wrestles like Anthony on the ground, so swift on his knee and on his hands and using his hands as legs almost. And so getting comfortable with that and the choreography. Then right after that, I went upstairs to Allison and became a martini glass for an hour. And then after that, I went on a Zoom and I Zoomed with a vocal coach for an hour and a half to change my New York like water and coffee into like water and coffee, the way Anthony speaks. And that's the Arizona dialect. And so that was a 9 to 5 for about 6 months, 5 days a
Now,
week.
did this come from,
I wanted to quit acting.
does this come from you that you demanded, I want you to sound like Anthony, I want you to walk like Anthony, all this training that he underwent? You, Billy.
So, I couldn't tell you really. Well, yeah. I just was, as an editor, I've been an editor my whole career, and I worked on many true stories, but obviously not as a director, and even as an editor.
Wait, this is his first directing gig.
Thank you.
He's Academy Award winner editor, but this is his first directing job.
Thank you. I felt this. You always feel a tremendous responsibility when you're telling the story, a true story, and you may know relatives, but of the actual person. But in this particular movie, obviously, I got to know Judy and Anthony. I feel like they're a member of my family at this point, and it really was the most important thing to me to make them proud and to make sure they were happy with the final result. And I just thought, for ultimate accuracy, and for it to feel as real as possible, all these things had to be accomplished. I mean, like Jharrel said, he couldn't just. The way Anthony moves, on crutches, is smoother than most of us, move on 2 legs. So to have him, he could, like you said, he couldn't look like he just picked up the crutches a week ago. So he had to look exactly the way Anthony did and learn to wrestle in a way like Anthony wrestles. And his voice, actually, the voice was actually Jharrel's idea. But when I was thrilled that he came up with that idea, so we found him a dialect coach. But I wanted this movie to be as authentic as possible and I wanted put the audience in the room with the actors, in the room with, like feeling like you're on the mat in the wrestling. And so it's the whole film's shot handheld, and it feels, hopefully feels kind of verite and first person. So, and to do a movie like that, it has to be completely authentic, and that was a big part of it.
I'm glad you brought that up. The camera work, if you guys notice, when it comes to the wrestling sequences, it's all handheld. You also have us down on the ground, on the mat. Tell us about your working with your DP for that approach. And also, on the same vein, I was so impressed that every wrestling match is completely different. The pace, the look, the way you bring us into the wrestling match, everyone is completely different.
Well, yeah, we wanted to put the audience on the mat with the wrestlers, and everybody in the film, every wrestler is D1 wrestler, especially the main wrestlers, or Division I college wrestlers. And everybody, all the wrestlers are real wrestlers. All the referees are real referees. All the announcers are the real announcers. The ESPN guys are the real guys. And that just adds so much to the authenticity. But when they're wrestling, because the choreography is so detailed and so on point, they're wrestling full out. I mean, it's not like a boxing movie where they're pulling, you can't, hit somebody in the face with a left hook full on and expect them to get up again. But the wrestlers are so skilled, and Jharrel got so skilled that they can wrestle full out, and that's why it looks so good, because it's not like they're play acting. I mean, they're really wrestling. I mean, it is choreographed, but sorry. Yeah, I mean, my credit to Sal Totino, who was our director of photography and the camera operators. They, like I said, everything was really choreographed in great detail, and so they were able to follow the action, and they were, running around on the mat with cameras, either holding them down like on the ground, or they had them on the shoulder, and we had a special rig so they could take just the head of the camera off so that it was lighter, so they could run around with it like a handle and run around on the ground with it. And then we also built an 8x4 glass platform that was 4 feet off the ground, and had the cameramen on their back shooting up through the glass for some of it, so you could, because there's a lot of wrestling, they'll be down, their heads down, so I wanted to see what what their faces were, what they're going through emotionally, the strain of it, how difficult it was, and so we got that angle too, so to make, like, really put people in it, and like every single match, like the final match against Matt McDonough, we shot at the Galen Center at USC, but it's supposed to be Wells Fargo Center. But our production designer made that place look exactly like it did when Anthony won in his senior year, to the point where when Anthony and Judy walked in that first day to the arena and saw it, they both, I hope you don't mind, they both actually burst into tears, and because it was identical looking. So everything, again, I think making it authentic like that, just the audience knows it and can sense it, and I wanted to make the wrestling community proud. I've met so many of people that are involved in wrestling in the United States, and been to the Nationals twice, and met everybody, and I felt, again, this incredible responsibility to get this right. I wanted the wrestlers to really, I obviously want the whole movie to work, but I really wanted the wrestlers to feel like we did something and got it right.
But you also do something that, I mean, I love to hear how you achieved it, where, like, I mean, I don't know anything about wrestling, and I started watching the movie, and I was I started learning about it. But it wasn't didactic the way you did it. It was very subtle, and, can you tell us about, leading us that are not familiar with the wrestling?
Well, I think ultimately audiences understand there's going to be, with wrestling, there's a clock and there's a winner and a loser, and so you don't have to give them too much information. I mean, I think what makes the wrestling work is the emotional story that we're telling. That you don't really need to know, like, what all the moves are called, and we explain some of it, and you do, I think, as the movie goes on, learn more and more. But I think it's pretty self-evident, and people are smart, and I wanted to give the audience credit that they'll pick it up, they'll be along for the ride because of the way it's shot, because of the way it's done. They'll be along for the emotional journey, which will pull them through the sort of rule part of it. And in terms of what you were saying earlier about different, we tried to make each match different, look a little different, shot a little different. The wrestle off is completely different looking than the practice wrestling or your junior year finals. It's like, when we actually, even junior year finals, we shot it a little differently and color timed it differently to make it look unique to, so it wouldn't look the same. And so we it was subtle differences each time to make it feel unique. But mostly, I think it's, again, having each match is telling a story, and that story in each match is different. So I think that in turn makes the wrestling, each kind of approach to each match, feel different. So it's, again, credit to the screenwriter, because action movies can be great. I mean, or action scenes, sports scenes can be great, but if it doesn't pull the story forward, then that they'll get boring after a minute. So I think
Right.
it's mostly due to the fact that we advance the story each time there's a match.
Judy, the Jennifer Lopez performance is so specific, mannerisms. I'd love to hear your input in working with her. I noticed that she sways back and forth when you're watching the wrestling matches, and she's like very anxious. She cannot keep still,
That's very true. From early on, she wanted to make sure that it was authentically me, and she would ask, like, what did you feel like when you were watching Anthony wrestle? And I was like, I couldn't sit still. And then I was always pacing if I could pace, if there was like walking up and down the steps, or in my seat. When I couldn't, I would rock back and forth. It just kind of like this. And we were sitting with her, and then she's like this. I'm like, yeah, that's it perfectly. But she made sure to get me in there to make sure that it was authentically me. And she added a lot of parts from our conversations, things she said, but really wanting to get to the heart of me and how I felt, and then our relationship and how that worked. And to Jharrel and Jennifer's credit, Anthony and I have had a lot of nonverbals, because in our home we couldn't really, talk to each other and comfort each other and lift each other up. So we had our own language. So they would ask us, and we'd be like, oh, okay, but we'd have to give them something. So we would talk through, but they developed it so perfectly and in such an amazing and genuine way that Anthony and I are very proud of everything that was portrayed. But Jennifer was always kind and didn't want to overstep and said, if you don't want me to use this, I won't use this. But I knew I had to be vulnerable because everybody here was working so hard on it. Billy had come to see us and, met my kids, and we were all excited. And I knew that I had to open up. So the more I shared with her, she's extremely talented and didn't need my input at all. She could have done an amazing job. But it mattered to her how I felt and how I cared and how I was in this. So it meant a lot to me.
Thank you. Jharrel, they're very much involved with the production, and I kept thinking the responsibility on your shoulders to do the right thing, to respect their legacy, but they're hovering over you. Was that stressful? Was it helpful?
Yeah, it was. Actually, no. To be honest, by the time we got to set, I had known Anthony and Judy for 4 years. So I got on this project in 2019, before COVID and before the writer's strike. So it's kind of been an on and off, unstoppable process between, like that. And so by the time we even started shooting, I felt as though it was beyond me portraying a guy who has accomplished something. This was me getting to play my brother, or a friend, a really good friend in my life, and someone who's inspired me now for multiple years of my life. So you would think that added the pressure, but it actually soothed everything for me, and it was almost therapeutic. And it wasn't even looking at Anthony like, hey, man, how am I doing? We just exchanged those quiet looks, and I'm just looking at him, he look at me, and he'd be like, but that's one side of it. For me, it was coming up to Judy. Judy, at one point, came up to me on set, and she said, Jharrel, you are my son. And that was all the validation I needed. Because it's one thing for Anthony to be like, I think that's me. And it's one thing for his mother to absolutely know that it's him. So having them there was helpful and very validating, and kind of informed a lot of my performance, actually.
And then the two of you worked together. You would do part of the performance, and then and you're gonna make me cry now. And then Anthony did the parts of the wrestling. I'd love to hear from the two of you about working together to perform the wrestling sequences.
Go ahead, man.
Yeah, it was just hours of repetition on the wrestling mat. And what I really appreciated about Jharrel is, his attention to the small details on the wrestling mat. We were correcting the angles. We were getting the timing down perfectly with our opponents. So they recognized just our movement, our speed, just getting it constantly dialed in. And like you heard, the wrestling was very high level and it was very unique with being my style. But Jharrel just constantly going back into that room and really just breaking everything down. He absorbed it like a sponge. So for me, this is what I knew. You know, the wrestling mat, that was my background. But really, Jharrel was the one that made it all possible because of all the effort he put into it so that we could bring 100% intensity in these scenes.
Well, okay, to actually compliment you back now, he's new to film sets and Hollywood. You know, it's one thing for him to wrestle and to get on the mat like he does in these competitions and in his programs at school and all that. But it's another thing for lights and cameras and now do it again and do it again and do it again. And so it actually helped seeing him like that, because prior to that experience, I've seen him in his confidence setting, you know, in his wrestling room, teaching me how to move like him. On set, it was almost like teaching him how to breathe and to stay patient and to stay focused. And so that informed a lot of those vulnerable moments I had as well. It almost like took seeing him on set to grab those moments of like knowing what he's like scared, because I actually saw you scared on set. But he would look at me like, is this fine? Is it good? Is it and it's funny, we go 6 months of me asking him, am I good? To go now 6 weeks of him asking me if I'm, you know, opposite.
And I'd love to hear, Billy, how this setup worked out. I noticed that in the wider shots, the medium shots, Anthony, you were capturing him, and then the tighter shots is Jharrel.
Well, I mean, I have to say it's pretty much I mean, in the wider, big wide shots, it's mostly Anthony, but in the rest of the coverage, we would have them both do all the choreography, you know, against the same opponent, and in multiple angles and multiple takes. Sometimes we do the whole match, sometimes we just do one period, depending on how tired everybody was, and because you know we were very careful about safety. But we did all the coverage with both Jharrel and Anthony, and then in the editing room, we just used what was best. And
you could keep track of who was who?
Well, I'm happy to say sometimes I can't, because they both, I mean, obviously Anthony's going to be amazing, but then Jharrel did such an amazing job. I mean, and through visual effects, we were able to make them look like one person. And there are times now where, I mean, I've seen the film, obviously, who knows how hundreds of times, and there's sometimes I can't tell who's who, or a lot of times, and that makes me so happy, because it means to me, obviously, it's working. If I can't tell, I'm sure these guys can, but you know, we just use what was best, you know, and we just use what was best in the edit, like you would in anything, any action scene, any performance-driven thing. You just use the best takes, and sometimes it was Anthony, and sometimes it was Jharrel, and it was a pleasure, because it was like gave us an incredible amount of choices, because they were both so good, you know, and we just, you know, did the appropriate visual effect to make those shots work.
Mm-hmm. And Jharrel, I read an interview with you that everything was shot sequentially, but the family drama part was first, and then the wrestling was after. You know, can you tell us about how was it for you to do it in that order?
It was actually, it was trippy at first while I was in it and doing it, but now in hindsight, I'm so grateful for how it actually panned out, because first of all, it felt like I shot 2 different films. We shot for 11 days, 12 days, all the family sequences, and then on day 11 or 12, the writer's strike started. And so they shut down production entirely when we were supposed to go into the wrestling scenes the next week. So instead of going into the wrestling scenes the next week, I went into the wrestling scenes 90 days later. So I actually got to...
It was actually 6 months.
6 months,
yeah.
Right? Oh, wow. So I had to stay in the damn gym for 6 more months and stay on the crutches for 6 more months. And it honestly, again, informed the performance. I don't know if you could tell, but it seems like I think it looks like I get bigger throughout the film. That's just because I kept working out for 6 more months. So my body was just at a different point. When I came back to set, I was more in shape, and I was like slightly bigger and a bigger build. And so it almost worked out, because most of the times at home, I'm in a hoodie and I'm in a sweater. So you don't really see where my physique is at, but by the time we get to the wrestling scenes at the end, I'm like, yeah, you know? So it actually worked out, and but it was exhausting, and it was interesting to hold on to this project for more than 4 years of my life. I got cast in this project when I was 22, and I'm 27 now. So it's like unstoppable.
And Judy and Anthony, to the both of you, there is a lot of darker moments and sadder moments in your story that are addressed in the film delicately. But I'm just wondering, what was it like for you guys to have to revisit the painful moments in the story?
I got to give a lot of thanks to Billy, for finding that delicate balance, because I think that's something that really, as a family, we were really cautious of and worried about. But just having our input, we would read the different scripts, the revisions, and we'd sit there as a family, basically, and just talk about our concerns about it. But I think in a way that was very therapeutic for us as a family, to discuss those things that we didn't really discuss in the past, and we'd also just be able to see that we made it through all that. But I think in the end of it, we decided as a family that, in order for this film to be something that we're truly proud of, it had to have the truth. It had to be relatable to everyone, because I think that's what people relate to. It's not just great times all the time, right? It's the struggles, it's the being knocked down, it's the pain that you feel going through regular life. And we felt like in order to get that ultimate message across of Unstoppable, we had to be as true as possible. And we came together to that conclusion as a family together. Mm-hmm. And these amazing people were very respectful in how they told it. So it was just the balance of it all.
And Judy, I want you to have the last word. What do you want people to take away from your story?
Oh, Anthony has a better line than I do with this.
No, you're pretty eloquent.
No, I just want them to be encouraged. I'm going to take some lines from my son, but we all have obstacles in our lives. We all have challenges that we have to overcome. Mine was family. I was a stay-at-home, uneducated, mother of 5, and suddenly I found myself having to figure out a life. But it was those moments, just having hope that things could get better, that I could change, and to not let that define who I am or who you are, but to use those struggles and those challenges to get stronger and to move forward. And I think that's the message I want people to take away, is that, that be inspired, because just deal with what's in front of you and just take it a little step at a time, because it wasn't overnight. I didn't just wake up and I was a doctor. I didn't, Anthony just didn't win a championship. There's steps along the way, and there's that feeling of defeat and why am I doing this, and the tears and the crying and you're getting angry and it's not changing and things are like, you feel like you're going in a cycle, but to keep pushing forward. And I'm blessed to be sitting here, with this story being shared, and I'm hoping that, people just don't give up.
Thank you, all 4 of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Spread the word.
Thank you, guys.